Hello. All right, so a little bit about HighWire. We partner with scholarly and STM publishers and provide online platforms. Oh, sorry, can you hear me? Sorry. So HighWire, we partner with, let me do this, scholarly and STM publishers, and we're a platform provider, peer-reviewed journals and ebooks. And here are some interesting statistics about HighWire. Most importantly, probably for this conversation, is that we currently have 1,100 books. We expect to have about 33,000 by the end of 2014. This is an indication that a lot of the scholarly publishers, primarily journal publishers, are really getting into the ebooks business. I'll describe a little bit about that. I'm also seeing a lot of organizations that have very separate journal business units from ebook business units or book business units, and they're combining and consolidating efforts a little bit more. So in my presentation, I am going to, actually, am I missing a slide? Oops, skipped a slide. First, I'll define discovery, not in general, but what I mean for this presentation, because discovery means a lot of things to a lot of people. So I'll define that. I'll define the steps of discovery and what you can do to make your ebooks more discoverable, some editorial and platform considerations. So for this presentation, discovery is the entire process that a consumer or reader experiences from finding the book, evaluating, assessing whether it's a book that they're interested in investing in, and then deciding to invest in the book. And investing in the book may be purchasing the book, or if they have institutional access, then investing is the decision to invest in time and or download the PDF. In a .com world, this would be a conversion process, but discovery does not end at the point that you find the book. There's still a lot more steps to take the user through and turn that book into one that the reader invests in and reads and maybe ultimately cites. So the path to discovery is really not all that different as it is for ebooks as it was in the, or is still in the brick and mortar building bookstore process. First, you have to find a book amongst many books on the shelves. Then you have to evaluate the book. Remember, well, I'm sure a lot of us, I still do go to brick and mortar buildings, but you grab the book, you flip through it, you look at the cover, you look at the table of contents, and you decide if it's worth taking it up to the counter and purchasing it or sitting in the corner and reading it. So then you make a decision about whether to invest. I intentionally picked a photo here of somebody who's reading it to show it's not always the purchase of the book, because they might have the institutional access. And investing time is a really important decision to make, because the scholars and the researchers don't have a whole lot of it. So they're picking very carefully what content it is that they want to read and invest their time in. So how does one find an ebook? They can find a book from a search result, the Google and Bings of the world, or from a book site. And if you attended the Simon Inger presentation yesterday, through his studies, he suggests that a lot of the book discovery happens after you're already on the book platform. That could be a publisher's platform, anywhere where someone might find a catalog of books or repository of books. Everybody has their go-to place. It might be, in a specific specialty or discipline. It could be a publisher's site, an aggregator, a retail site, a digital library. Another way a reader or scholar might find a book is through a recommendation. That recommendation might be from a peer, word of mouth, or digitally through Twitter or email or some social site, or from a site. We've all seen the Amazon is famous for those who bought this book also bought that, so there's the machine recommendations. And then very prominently in the scholarly world, which is a little different than the broader consumer world, is references from a journal or book bibliography. Journals reference books. That's one way to find and discover books. In evaluating and looking at where to host your books, you should look for linked references. And then the library catalog. Let's not forget about that as a place where one might find a book. But to be found, the book must be visible. So putting your book on many well-traveled paths is what a lot of publishers are already doing. Be where the readers are. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a very strategic place that I think the readers are, where ebooks should be discoverable. And then this sounds obvious, but don't hide the book information behind access control. Book information is not what you need to protect. The title, the cover image, the back cover content, the abstract, the table of contents, all of those things that we did in this step in the brick and mortar bookstore situation. Get back to my slide. So if you hide that, it's not visible. It's like this image locked up. Imagine, would you read this book? There's no title, there's no cover page, there's no table of contents. You know nothing about it. You'll skip right over it. And then making this information available in text and metadata so that the bots of the search engines can find and know what this book is about so that it can be ranked in a search engine. And then also people, the same metadata and text and information is what helps the person decide whether it's a book that they want to invest in. So it supports indexing, and also from a platform perspective, it's what feeds the recommendations engines. So in Amazon's case, it's customers who bought this also bought this. At HighWire, it's related content. If you're reading something about schizophrenia, we might recommend a book about schizophrenia. Or it could be based on browser behavior or personal behavior. Maybe I looked at schizophrenia last week, but now I'm looking at something completely different. I still might be recommended a book on schizophrenia because the platform knows that I have been interested at some point in my browsing history in that topic. So the text and the metadata, making sure it's visible to people and to bots so that it can empower recommendations and can be indexed in search results. So it's really important that if you are to be referenced in search results, you have to have a place to land for the search result to show up. It has to be a link to a place, and you don't want that to be the top-level catalog where you might search. If you find the topic of a book and there's a specific book that you're interested in, you need some kind of a landing page, and this landing page is very important, that it has a unique and perpetual URL, not a dynamically generated URL that changes all the time. Otherwise, I can't copy it and send it in an email to somebody. I can't share it on Twitter. I can't share it in Facebook or LinkedIn. So having a landing page and then also making sure that it's a unique and perpetual URL is very important. And if the URL has the title of the book, it's not a whole bunch of long, huge string of characters that might wrap 3 times in an email, or 5 or 10 times I've even seen. So they might not be things that we as publishers necessarily think about, but having a place that's a destination, that's a nice URL, will help the search engines index it, have a place to go to, and then the information, the URL, also helps with the relevancy in the search engine. If the search engine knows, they can pick up some information about the URL, and they apply that in their algorithms. So here's an example of a HighWire book landing page. It's got all of the things that one would need to evaluate whether they want to invest in the book. It's got the cover image, the title, and very importantly, the table of contents. Don't forget the table of contents. How often is the first thing that you do in the brick and mortar building? Flip open and read all of the chapter titles. It's the quickest scan to get an idea if it's a book that you're interested in reading. Here's an example of a landing page from Project MUSE. Same thing. You've got the title, the cover image, the table of contents. And again, it's a place for a search engine to send visitors. It's a book landing page. So here Google referenced it, indexed it, and there's a link to it. If there wasn't a landing page, there would be no place for Google to find and link directly to that book. And library discoverability. For those who do sell to institutions, you do want the patrons of the libraries to be able to find your book so that those potential patrons might be ones that cite your book and share the book and use the book in their own research or what they're reading about in their own research. So MARC records are important to make available for the librarians to download so that they can keep their catalog updated. So it's more than just making the institutional sale. It's helping the library with the discoverability so that those books get to the patrons and they're easy for them to find in whatever method that they use to find the book. And people still do use the library catalog to find books. So the next section was a way to discover a book is through recommendations. So this is the famous customers who bought this item also bought this from Amazon. Here's recommendations on a HighWire landing page. You can see that there's related publications to this book and table of contents. That reference might be a recommendation with a link to a book, or it could be a chapter, because sometimes it's the chapter that's most relevant to what you're reading. I'll give you a broad example. Let's say there's a book about breeds of dogs, and each chapter is on a different breed. and you're interested in St. Bernards, and that's all you care about. And if the title of the book is Dog Breeds, it's not going to be as helpful if you see the chapter, St. Bernards and everything you need to know about St. Bernards. So if you're reading another book or an article or something on St. Bernards and you see a related link that says St. Bernards, you're more likely to click that because it's more relevant to you than dog breeds. Here's an example of Project MUSE. They do the same thing with the related content. In this case, it's a link to a book that's related to the topic of the book. 21st Century Hollywood is recommending some books that are related to that topic. So I mentioned earlier about well-traveled paths. So most of you publish journals, or a lot of our publishers that have worked with HighWire publish journals, and this is the primary reason why we have invested so much in our eBook suite of products, because what you have as a journal publisher is a well-traveled path of scholars. Journals are published more often and more frequently, and scholars are looking for an answer to a question, and they don't really care if the answer to the question is in an article or a book chapter or a book. They want to know and find all of the content that's available to them. So there's a lot of channels out there that publishers push to get their books hosted in many different places, and don't forget about the channel you have right at home as your journal articles. So here's an example of a HighWire article on ZNT4, providing zinc-to-zinc dependent proteins. And as I travel down, on the right side, you'll see related books to this topic that I'm reading. The beauty of books is they often have beautiful and different book covers. Articles don't often have an image associated, but every book has some kind of cover, and it's usually nice and colorful and displays well. So you have your own ad creative department with your book covers. You don't need to invest in more creatives. So recommendations from peers. A recommendation from a platform is valuable, but a recommendation from somebody you know, especially somebody who you like, is even more powerful. So in evaluating platforms and where you host your books and assessing how discoverable your books might be there, make sure that there are social sharing, and don't forget sharing by email. I often find myself emailing myself a link because I don't want to forget about it, or emailing a peer, or maybe I'm not too social. I don't want my entire community to know that I'm interested in this book. So don't forget about the power of just emailing. And in this case, in this particular case, you can email one specific page of a book, but I'll get to that a little bit later. So the path to discovery. I talked about finding a book and some of the considerations in a platform, and evaluating the book. Back to that landing page, everything that you wanted to look at when you're flipping through in the brick and mortar building, all of that information is a good guide to what should be on the landing page, and what would naturally be important to you in that process is what should display on your landing page, as well as strong call to actions about how to take a next step about making a decision to invest in the book. And then the last step is the decision to invest, whether it's time or money. And I describe success in a variety of ways. No, I didn't. Bad word. So, moving on. The first and obvious form of success is purchasing, but if they have institutional access, then it could just be reading or downloading. We all have those statistics that we track, and those are really important, and all of those statistics are sent in counter reports to the libraries so that they can make decisions about what to purchase. Save for later. I may not be ready, or I may be in a hurry right now. Another form of success is, I know I might be interested in this. You want to make sure your platform provider has a way to save it. One example is the email that I talked about later, maybe adding to a folder, bookmarking it. Everybody knows how to bookmark, but is there a button that's really obvious that helps you? Something, whatever the saving mechanism is, there should be one. And then sharing with a friend, whether it's email or social sharing. And the last one I added here, because it's just been interesting conversations in the last few months, and that's the rights to share with the class. There's instructors putting together course packs, or not even necessarily course packs, but recommended readings, and they need to do this legally. CIPIX is a partner that we work with, and they're also working with a lot of libraries that make it easy for professors to use and access the rights to this content and not break any copyright laws, and then include the publisher in this process. And even though you might not be able to track that success directly, it is a form of conversion. So some editorial considerations. Now that we've unbound the book and we've given respect to the chapters, and we can share a chapter, and we can recommend a chapter, don't forget to think about the chapter names. They're just as important now as the book titles. Just like article names, there's a lot of thought that's put into them. Because readers might find the chapter and see the name of a chapter before they see the name of your book. So think about how much effort you spend on that and review those. And then chapter abstracts. Chapter abstracts are what helps the reader know if it's something that they're interested in. It also helps the bots and the platforms know what the chapter's about so that we can recommend the right content to the right reader. We can recommend the correct chapter to the right reader. That example I gave on St. Bernard's, well, maybe there's something really specific I want to learn about St. Bernard's. If we have an abstract, it tells me a little bit more what the chapter's telling me about St. Bernard's, and then we can more effectively recommend in the platform to the right reader that specific chapter. So here's an example of a book that I found with some really good chapter titles. IIS is a Microsoft service or technology. I think it stands for Internet Information Service. I picked it because it had good chapter names. If you look at most of these chapter names, they stand well on their own. Understanding IIS 7.0 architecture. That's not the name of the book, but if I saw that, I would know what that chapter was about and what is likely to be in that chapter. I pulled a few out that are good: introducing IIS 7.0, understanding the architecture, using IIS Manager, and sometimes a chapter title, and very often in recommendations and in platforms, you'll see the chapter title with the book title. So that's okay too. If you're struggling with the chapter title, consider the value of it on its own with the book title. So IIS Resource Kit is the name of the book. Managing Websites is the name of the chapter. Those together is a really effective information that at a glance I know if it's useful to me. So even though the platform behind the scenes knows because of all of the metadata that you made available in the chapter abstracts, and that gets put in front of me as a reader, you still need to remember a human being ultimately is making a decision. The human being doesn't process all that metadata, nor do they see it. They see the chapter title. So back to that tweet. Here's an example of a tweet from a HighWire, page 52 of a book. I'm a very lazy tweeter, so all I did was I got to page 52. I knew that my researchers would be really interested in this, but I'm in a rush. So all I did was click tweet. And I ignored the comment section. I didn't want to bother giving any information about why I thought it was useful. So all it did was pull the book title, the chapter title, and the page of the book that I was on, and includes a link to the page of the book. Not to the book landing page, not to the chapter, but directly to the page of the book. Without doing anything, all of the relevant information, because this publisher chose a really good book title and a really good chapter title, combined together with a link to the page of the book, not only was it easy for me to tweet and share, but it's easier for my peer who receives this to get right to the page they wanted, because maybe that page 52 out of a 500-page book has the image that I'm most interested in finding. So I didn't have to give it any instructions on go to chapter 3, navigate about halfway through, you'll find this really great image. So chapter abstracts. If your book's platform knows what your chapters are about, what they're about, it can be smarter. I already talked about how in the platform search that indexing chapters rather than the entire text is going to be more useful. There's a lot of value and strategic ways to write chapter abstracts. Rich actually knows a lot about this in that it's search engine optimized, but there's less noise. I mean, a chapter might have 50 pages of text, but an abstract is only a couple paragraphs, so it can inform the search engine better. And same with recommendations. And we can recommend, and many platforms, actually I don't know if all platforms can, but I know many platforms recommend, but at HighWire we can recommend a book or a chapter, and I think you'll see a lot more of this happening. So in creating abstracts, it can be part of your editorial process. Some publishers already have the authors or editors or subject matter experts as part of the process write chapter abstracts. You can also outsource it. Rich's company Scope does a good job of doing that in a way that's got search engine optimization built into the abstracts. And assigning DOI to your chapters, we've discussed that a little bit in the first two speakers. That's important to assign DOIs and deposit them at Crossref and link the references. And some other considerations, I sent an email out to our content team and told them about the panel and asked, what do you want me to tell the publishers who attend this? So this is what they said. At the book part level, include as much information about the authors, including their affiliations. Include ORCID IDs. That's a unique ID for an author identifier. You can learn more about that at orcid.org. Ensure that the chapters are segmented into logical, sellable units or consumable units. Even if they're not sold to an individual, they need to be consumed by an individual if in the institutional access. So it's better for ebooks to break your chapters logically rather than artistically. So let's consider the author. This is probably how Kent felt when he wrote the article that, not the article, he wrote a chapter in a book. His content was locked behind bars. Nobody could find it. Authors want their works found and read. Scholarly books are often authored by, each chapter is by a different author. They want their contribution. They don't want it locked inside a book. They want all of the independent authors called out so that it's not just one author per book. And we can learn from journals. Articles are not locked inside a journal. They might have been. We could have made really bad decisions early on in putting articles online, but we didn't. We didn't lock those articles inside journals, and we don't want to lock the chapters either. Discoverable chapters create happy authors. If you have discoverable chapters, you can market this to your authors. You can say you should publish with me because your chapters will be found. They won't be locked inside a book. So in summary, platforms that lead to successful discovery should have, in the 3 steps that they outlined in finding, evaluating, and investing a book, book landing pages with unique URLs that are not hidden, a recommendation service, linked bibliographies, chapter-level information that's both stored and indexed, mobile-friendly reading, so for those that are evaluating on a mobile device, they can still consume the information on the landing page, and useful information on the landing page, including the table of contents. The decision to invest, make sure the buy, read, download buttons, whatever action you want them to take are prominent and not hidden. A way to save or bookmark or email the chapter or book to yourself, download the PDF, and have access to sharing features. In publishing practice, practices that can lead to successful discovery: informative book and chapter titles, segmenting the chapters into logical units, not artistic ones, creating chapter DOIs and depositing them at Crossref, the informative metadata so that the consumers have the information they need to make the investment, cross-promotion between journals and books, don't forget about the channel that you have right at home, and the ability to recruit book authors by letting them know that the chapters that they write are discoverable units. Thank you very much.